Well, welcome to the podcast,
Thank you.
Alan. Super thrilled to have you. I'm a big fan of yours.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, I would love to hear everything about Endeavor. Like, how did you start? What was entrepreneurship like 2 decades ago? And how did you dive into this? And what's the journey been?
Wow, how much time do you have? Well, Endeavor today is 27 years old. So as we were talking a little bit before off camera, it started out life as a nonprofit organization.
Mhm.
Right, still today the core of it is a mission-driven nonprofit committed to supporting, mentoring, coaching entrepreneurs in emerging and underserved markets all around the world. But we got our start in Latin America. So Argentina and Chile and Brazil were some of the very first Endeavor offices in the late 1990s. And when we started, I think the insight was that there's amazing talent everywhere,
Mhm.
but the networks of expertise and knowledge and know-how and capital, especially smart connected capital, were really not as evenly distributed all around the world, right? It
Right.
tended to be in Silicon Valley or maybe in New York or London or certain places. And Endeavor, set out to really bring those networks to these great founders everywhere.
Everywhere. And starting with Latin America, where there isn't a lot of wealth and wealth creation. So, how do you approach a country when you go into a Latin America based
Well, a
center?
lot has
Yeah.
changed in now 27 years. But yeah, in the late 1990s, when we started working in Spanish-speaking Latin America and in Brazil,
Right.
um, notably there wasn't even really a word in Spanish or in Brazilian Portuguese
Right.
for entrepreneur, right, or entrepreneurship. This is
Right.
a fairly new activity. And what Endeavor started with was this concept that we needed to build a network of trust.
Mm.
Because if you think about it, what underpins Silicon Valley, yes, it's smart people and it's technology and it's innovation, but more than anything, it's trust. It's that people are kind of
Right.
willing to help each other, to work together, to realize that it's not a zero sum game, right? That if I mentor you and coach this guy and invest in his startup, you can win and I can win and we can all win
Right.
together. And so, in some ways, that was really the cultural export from a place like Silicon Valley or the US to these markets, was to try to build a culture of trust, and what we still describe Endeavor as today is a global network of trust.
And you're now in 35 countries, 350 investments, $500 million as a fund. So every country you have a center for Endeavor, and you start off by just going and building local relationships. And then over a period of time, how does that grow? Like, pick a country and tell us what the process is.
Yeah, so I guess two things to talk about:
Yeah,
Endeavor itself, and then Endeavor Catalyst, which is
right.
the fund we've now built on top. And
Mm-hmm.
so for folks listening or watching, for 15 years, Endeavor grew around the world, opening these local offices and locally owned and operated kind of chapters. But we never invested in the businesses. I started working here in 2006,
Mm-hmm.
and around 2012, 2013 was the first time we actually said, hey, let's actually try also being an investor into the companies. And so the statistics you quoted about, we've now made close to 400 equity investments into the Endeavor
Right.
portfolio. That's all using the Endeavor Catalyst Fund over the last 12 or 13 years. But to answer your first question, Endeavor really believes that a locally owned and operated, locally kind of governed chapter has huge advantages
Mm-hmm.
of how to find and work with the best entrepreneurs in these markets. So when I first started working at Endeavor, we were in 5 countries. At one point, the big mission was to get to 25 countries
Mm.
by 2015. So we worked on expanding and growing the Endeavor model from the beginning in Latin America to a lot of the economies in the Middle East, and then eventually into Southeast Asia. Fast forward to today, we now have Endeavor entrepreneurs building companies in more than 50 countries.
It's crazy.
And we have teams on the ground in 63 different cities
Wow.
all around the world. But our real focus is not on the US and not on China
Mm-hmm. Right.
and not even on India.
Right.
It is elsewhere, right? It's on Latin America and the
Emerging
Middle East,
markets.
Africa, Southeast Asia, even in Europe, but it's Southern and Eastern and Central Europe.
So when you go to these countries, do you track technology companies, or is it any business?
So anything that can grow really fast can be an Endeavor entrepreneur.
I see.
Today, almost 90% of the portfolio is tech or tech enabled. because that's what allows things to grow
Uh-huh.
quickly. But it's all kinds of applications of technology you might not expect. So it's not only pure software businesses or pure AI companies. It's
Mm-hmm.
using technology to solve real world problems in all these markets around the
And
world.
then you go in, and if it's venture scale, then you invest.
Yeah. So, in a sense, Endeavor is not about startups,
Right.
it's about scale ups. So, I always say we're not Y Combinator. We don't do the 0 to 1 part of company
Right.
building. But once you have product market fit and you have real revenue, the challenges to a founder or a founding team, they change. Right now, it's not about finding that original product market fit. Now it's about scaling
Right.
your team, your go to market, maybe even yourself, right, as a leader. And so Endeavor works at that stage. We say we're not about startups, we're about scale ups.
I
And we
see.
really try to help those guys scale their companies and scale themselves as leaders and CEOs.
So, at what scale are you bringing them in? Because each country probably has a different set of dynamics when it comes to growth.
Yeah, so good question. Endeavor is very much, as I mentioned, locally owned and operated, but there's a global standard. So you can only
Mm,
become part of the network and be invited to join if you pass something called the International Selection Panel.
I see.
We host these about 10 times a year, 5 virtual and 5 in person. We just had one actually last week outside of Cape Town in South Africa. So we had there, teams from 15 different countries, the founders and co-founders of these businesses, competing to become part of the Endeavor network. If you look at the whole funnel,
Mm-hmm.
we select about the top 1% of founders to actually join the network. So if you ever meet somebody who's an Endeavor entrepreneur, that's a very real seal of approval. They worked very hard to get there.
I see. And then they are supported through your network through resources or Silicon Valley contacts, or what do they get from it?
So the biggest thing that we've learned over the 25 years is that the original thesis that we would connect people to mentors in places like Silicon Valley or New York City is
Mm-hmm.
still a real value proposition, right? Entrepreneurs do come here and they learn from folks, and that's a big part of why we have an office here
Mm,
and why I live here. Um, but the greatest unlock has actually proven to be the peer network of these entrepreneurs learning from each other,
of
right? And
course.
so the person building a payments business in Nigeria learned so much from the guy building the payments business in Brazil and the one building it in Indonesia.
Right.
And now that Endeavor has reached real scale, right? To give you a sense, I mentioned it's like 1%, but we have screened and spent time with more than 250,000 companies now, right? So it's about
Wow.
300,000 different businesses to get to the 3,000 or so Endeavor entrepreneurs that we support today. Um, and so at that kind of scale, with 3,000 different Endeavor entrepreneurs around the world, this peer network of the very best, fastest growing businesses is actually the most valuable asset, I think, to a lot of the founders.
Incredible. And then tell us about the fund. Do you fundraise globally as well?
We do. So it's a unique strategy. In fact, a lot of times people say, wait, so let me get this right. It's a nonprofit
Yeah.
and you fund it through donations, but now you built a for-profit venture capital fund on
Right.
top. Yes. So a lot of the folks who've supported and invested in the fund are from the same community, right?
Mhm.
So it's the board members, the mentors, the donors. In fact, even our own entrepreneurs are a big part of our LP base for the funds. So our very first fund was only $20 million.
Mm-hmm.
The second one was 80. The third one was 130. The current fund number 4, is 290 million. And then the next one that we'll start investing next year will be $300 million. So over time, it's grown up, but all of the investors into the funds are members of the Endeavor community. So you have successful Silicon Valley entrepreneurs like Reid Hoffman
Mm-hmm.
or Piero Midyar, the original founder of
Yeah.
eBay, Michael Dell. These folks have all been very supportive. But we have LPs actually from every single country where we work around the world.
I
So now
see.
think about success stories like Nubank coming from
Mm-hmm.
Brazil, or Mercado Libre, right, building the biggest
Are
e-commerce
they all
business in Latin
Endeavor
America.
entrepreneurs?
They're all also now LPs
Wow.
in the fund, right? So they start out as Endeavor entrepreneurs. We help them become successful, then they become part
Incredible.
of what we're
And
doing.
then you're doing transactions in all these different currencies, fundraising, investing. How does that
True.
work? What do you use? What's your platform and technology stack?
Well, the fund is a U.S. dollar fund. I mean, we
Right.
domicile it in Delaware. So in some ways, venture doesn't have to move that quickly. So we haven't yet tokenized the fund or anything
Okay.
like this. The old-fashioned way with
People are just
wiring money
investing.
from
Yeah, yeah,
Silicon
yeah.
Valley Bank to the company we're investing in.
Got it.
It is a global business for sure.
Right.
Time zone wise, it's a 24/7 business.
Incredible.
And we live in the worst time zone,
I
by the
know,
way.
California.
I was up at 5:30 this
Unless you're in
morning.
Hawaii.
Yeah, unless you move to Hawaii, we're kind of the edge. We're the
Yeah.
end of the world here.
And so, what can you tell us from that eagle eye that you have over the entire world on entrepreneurship in emerging markets? What kind of trends do you see?
So one thing I will say is Endeavor definitely sees waves, right? Waves of technology as it comes through these markets. And that provides us a little bit of the ability to have almost like a time machine where if you go to a more frontier geography like Nigeria or like Pakistan,
Yeah.
we're building a lot of the businesses, the same types of companies that we were building 5 to 7 years ago in Southeast Asia,
Mm,
or maybe 7 to 9 years
that's
ago in
true.
Latin America, right?
Yeah,
And so we
right.
do see these cycles and waves. Um,
But then they can't compete in the global market because there's somebody ahead of them in another country.
but they don't need to,
Mm.
because to be clear, 75% of these big important companies that we're building are national or regional winners,
Ah,
right? They don't
wow.
have to be global companies. Some of them will be, right? So more and more, about a quarter of our business, our kind of global innovation comes from anywhere. But 3/4 is Mercado Libre, right? Mercado
Right.
Libre is Amazon or eBay for Latin America. It's only in Latin America. They didn't have to come to the U.S., right? Like
Mm-hmm.
their big business is Brazil. Their next biggest market is Mexico. Um, it's a $125 billion market cap business
Incredible.
built from Argentina. Right? This was one of the very early
Right,
Endeavor
right.
stories. Listed on the Nasdaq in 2007. Directly employs like 65,000 people. Indirectly has created several million jobs. It doesn't have to come to the U.S. or expand outside of the region. And this is something we really think is true. You mentioned the funds invested in more than 350 companies.
Mm-hmm.
Of those, 1 out of 6 has actually grown up to be $1 billion business,
It's
right? And so
incredible.
you can
That's like
you
is
could
that like Sequoia or even better
it's
or
pretty good hit rate.
yeah.
It's a pretty good hit rate. I'm on the board of the Kauffman Fellows, and Kauffman did a big study of kind of all the unicorns and all the unicorn investors, and figured out that if you study the whole market of the last decade, the odds of a company that raises seed capital, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is not every company in the market, but the ones who actually raise equity, the chance that that seed funded company grows up to be a unicorn is 1 in 140,
Mm-hmm. And
right? So
yours
it's
is
like a
one in
zero point
six.
0.7 chance. Endeavor's 1 in 6. So we have a pretty good success rate at doing it. But what surprises some people is that these have become really big businesses only in Nigeria or only in Egypt, right?
But the
Or only
market's
in
cap
Indonesia.
is large enough that you're saying it's sufficient.
There's so many unsolved problems that technology can contribute to in emerging markets, but particularly in a place like Silicon Valley, I think most of the folks based here are not thinking about the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, the reason why I'm so fascinated by this is because I think this is the solution to world peace. Because I think if you can, economic empowerment comes at a very different scale when you have venture capital.
Yeah.
And then if you can have women leadership, that immediately puts like 50%, the rate of violence will drop by
Mm-hmm.
50%. It stops domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
So you're in a position of power to be able to empower women across the globe.
Well, I think what the founders of Endeavor believed, and what we still believe today, is that economic development, so essentially job creation, wealth
Right.
creation,
Yeah.
what we call role model creation, right?
Hmm.
Creating examples of success stories so that, the next generation of boys and girls can look up and say, wait, if she can do it, if he
It's
can
like
do it,
the sub 6 minute miler,
maybe I
right? Or
can
the
do
four
it
minute.
too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, that's a great story, actually.
Yeah.
Do you know that
You
story?
told me that. I forget the name of the runner.
Oh, so the runner is it's an old story, but it's
Yeah.
Roger Bannister,
Roger Bannister, yes.
1954. He's the first human being to run a mile in under 4
In the
minutes,
4 minutes.
which is an incredible achievement in and of itself. But the reason we tell that story at Endeavor is that until he did it, people said this was impossible.
Impossible.
They said it's humanly impossible, cannot be done. No one will run a mile in under 4 minutes. And once he did it, his record held up for exactly 46 days.
Yep.
And then somebody else did it. And then a couple months later, a third person did it. And now I forget
know.
the numbers, but
And
now
it's
it's
all
like,
men, and that's my problem with it. But it's still incredible. Yes.
well, hang on. Now it's about 2,000 or 3,000 people
It's
have run a
incredible.
4-minute
Yes.
mile.
Yes.
There's a woman from East
I
Africa
know.
setting out to become the first woman to run a 4-minute mile.
Yeah.
But I think that the allegory or the takeaway there of, people will tell you it's
They need a role
impossible
model.
until
Yes.
someone
Yes.
does it. And once people can see that it's possible, so many other folks can do it as well.
Do it as well.
At the heart of it, that's what Endeavor is about. Yes, we track jobs created and wealth created and some of these metrics around economic development, but really if we can shift cultural perception of entrepreneurship over 10, 20, 30 years in some of these countries around the world, I think that's really the big prize.
That is the big prize.
And, Thomas Friedman back in the day when he was writing all these books about the world, called Endeavor the greatest anti-poverty model of all.
Oh, really?
And in some ways, it's somewhat like your comment about world peace, right? I think if we can really get entrepreneurship to thrive in all these countries around the world, the world's going to be a much better place.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is really the solution to it. To end violence, to be able to empower people to make a living is so hard, let alone start a venture scale business. And in that process, so many people must be aspiring to get into that network, that they must be building wealth as well and growing as people, which is incredible.
Yeah, some folks have actually set up very successful venture funds just investing into Endeavor's pipeline, right? Because if you think about
I should try that.
there's thousands of companies vying to join Endeavor every year, and there's some very, very good ones that haven't even made it into the Endeavor portfolio yet.
I see. Well, tell me about the characteristics of an entrepreneur you look for when you go for one of these, the final Shark Tank session.
Sure. I'd say for Endeavor, if you come and observe, you'll see people talking a lot about the founders, the business, and the timing, right? That's kind of the triangle we think about when we're selecting a new entrepreneur and a new company. But for the founders themselves, the things I've learned, looking at about 10,000 founders over the last 20 years, is that the good ones have two things in common, and the truly great ones have a third characteristic. So I think good entrepreneurs have a very high degree of self-confidence, right? I'll call this radical self-belief, right? They really believe in their idea and what they're doing and their mission in the world. But that's tempered by the second trait, which is intellectual curiosity. Right? So they don't think they know all the answers.
They want to learn.
Even if they have this high degree of self-confidence, they are willing to learn, right? And they're interested and they ask questions and they're inquisitive. And, those are the best entrepreneurs that become kind of these learning machines in a way. Just those two qualities, I think, will make you a pretty good entrepreneur. But what separates the good from the great is the third quality, which is resilience, just pure determination, persistence, just to keep working, because so much stuff goes wrong when you're building a company,
right,
over such a long period of time.
Yeah, you have to.
That only people who have kind of an incredible amount of just ability to overcome and be resilient end up being the really successful entrepreneurs.
Wonderful. And then you were saying about the business and then the timing. Any pointers there? What are you looking for in a business?
Look, Endeavor's very basic framework here, because we're industry agnostic. So we're looking at all kinds of companies all over the globe.
Right.
But we're asking ourselves the question, hey, can this be 10 times bigger than it is today? Right. That's kind of the scale point. And, that may be a business that already has achieved some scale and say, wow, to be 10 times bigger, it would be a $10 billion company, right? But if we believe that's possible, that's a bet Endeavor will make. But certainly, some of the things that lots of other smart investors will talk about for U.S. companies apply in emerging markets, around looking for, big markets with real defensibility, with real moats, with competitive edge, all these things. What's different in emerging markets is just the level of volatility.
Yeah.
Right. And so the best entrepreneurs we work with tend to be incredibly agile and adaptive to the more sort of ups and downs that they'll
Like
experience.
some of these countries don't have a government that's stable. Doesn't it influence your decision making?
Um, so certainly some of these governments around the world are challenged.
Yeah,
Um, as an American, I'll say that also might apply at home these days too.
that's
So
true.
you know, there's lots of challenges in government
Yeah,
globally.
that's true.
Um, but yeah, for sure, Endeavor has been working in Turkey since 2007.
Mm.
Uh, the Erdogan who led Turkey in the first few years is very different than the Erdogan who leads Turkey
Mm-hmm.
today, and that has had real implications for how to do business there. Having said that, we're not leaving Turkey, right? Like we have a long-term commitment to the entrepreneurs and to the founders and to what we're doing there.
Mm-hmm.
And what we found is it actually is can be good business, like from an investment perspective. Our venture funds have an 11x cash on cash return in dollars investing in Turkey,
Mm.
right? And to some degree, that's because this is a contrarian bet, right? A lot of investors are sort of scared away by currency fluctuation or
Right.
government instability or changes. And as long as you kind of stick with it and play for the long term, I think you can do really well in these markets.
Very inspiring. So tell me a book or a person who's inspired you.
Let's see. There are a lot. As somebody who believes in mentorship and role models and being a lifelong learner, um, I'll do a book or two. I think there's a fantastic book written by Michael Mauboussin
Mm-hmm.
that I read, probably 6 or 7 years ago, that really introduced this concept of luck versus skill in sports and in investing and in all these different kind of realms. And it made
Mm-hmm.
me think a lot. And I read it at the same time that I read a book by Annie Duke called Thinking in Bets.
Thinking in bets. Okay.
Annie Duke was a professional poker player,
Uh-huh.
right? And the one key idea behind Thinking in Bets is that we grow up in kind of a education system and a achievement culture where we're kind of taught like, oh, as long as you follow all the rules, you will win the game.
Right.
Right? Life is chess, right?
Yeah.
Here,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
million permutations, but there's a set of rules, and here's how it works.
That's how school works. Yeah.
And the main thing I took away from Thinking in Bets is like life is not chess. Life is poker. There's some amount of rules.
Mm.
Uh, there's other humans involved in the way it works. And in fact, it really is about also being willing to make a bet at certain times. And there's some amount of skill involved, but there's some amount of luck, right? And I think the older I get, the more I actually appreciate the role of luck and serendipity in a lot of these things.
Very cool. Thank you so much. Any
Mm-hmm.
passing final words for the audience?
Look, I think I shared this before, but maybe one of my favorite quotes is this thing attributed to Bill Gates that we as human beings tend to overestimate what we can do in 1 year, but underestimate what we can do in 10
It's
years.
incredible. Very inspiring. Yeah.
And so as somebody who's about to reach my 20 years of working at Endeavor in the next few months, I'll say if you can think 10 years at a time and really try to play for that decades at a time professional goals, it's a real competitive advantage, right? And I do believe in the kind of the compounding of human capital.
Uh-huh.
We all know about compounding from Warren Buffett, and we understand how it works in math and numbers, but I think it's real in human capital also. And so, if you can find something that you really love and work on it for a long time, I think that's how you change the world.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Of course.